I'm standing there with like the real life version, Gandalf of legal ops. And she's sort of laying it out for me. And it's like one of those things where like now you say legal ops and people go, yeah, of course. Right. Like, of course, it's obvious. Why wouldn't you run the function in this way? Why wouldn't you be thoughtful? Why wouldn't you have processes and systems and think about things systematically and work out your strategy? But at the time, like nobody was thinking this way. And she's like, well, we've been doing this at NetApp and some other companies are starting it. And would you like to get, once started at Yahoo and get involved in some of these meetings? And I was like, yeah.
Hi, everyone. This is Akshay Verma, the COO at SpotDraft and your host for the Beacon Voices podcast. And excited to have a conversation today with a legend in our space, Ron Bell, who is currently the Chief Legal and Administrative Officer at Collective Health. Ron, thanks for taking some time to talk with me today.
Thank you for having me.
How's it going? How are things going for you?
Good. Thanks for asking.
I obviously known about your work for a long time. As we were catching up before the recording, we're just kind of catching up around when we may have first met. And it reminded me like how small and insular this world really is. And especially here in the Bay Area, I mean, there are a ton of lawyers and legal ops professionals in the Bay Area. And the fact that you and I may have crossed paths at some point in 10 years down the road and still remember that interaction in some fashion, I think was a testament to how closely knit this community of lawyers and legal ops professionals are. And so I'd love to talk to you a little bit about your journey today. I want to talk a little bit about what really drew you to legal ops. And then we've got an exciting surprise coming up at Clock, which is still under wraps. But I think by the time this episode airs, it'll be out there in the public. And I want to talk a little bit about that project with you as well.
Great.
All right. So early days as a lawyer, is there anything that spoke to you back then about the operational side of being a lawyer? Is there anything that drew you in that said, there's got to be a better way of doing this, or we should really keep an eye towards these things that have nothing to do with lawyering and are more about the business side of the law?
Yeah, well, the early days of lawyering, I mean, maybe to put it in perspective, I mean, I became a lawyer back in the early 90s, right? So for some of the people listening to the podcast, that's when they were born. And email in law firms was a new thing back in the early 90s, just to put this all in perspective. So was there a way to do things better? Heck yeah, but the technology didn't exist, and business was really, really very different back then. The pace was still fast, but it was much slower. Things were less global, less fast. There was less intensity. And I don't think that I so much thought like, oh, there's a bunch of things we could do better, so much as I was like, wow, we're still doing things a lot of the same way that our predecessors did them back in the early 1900s, right? Like the computer may spit out the draft, right? But like instead of a typewriter or a typing pool, but still going to the partner who prints it out and then writes on it and then hands it to somebody and then they work with it. But what was becoming obvious even then, I think, as a young associate, was technology's ability to connect people and the interdisciplinary nature of a lot of the work that was going to get done. And that just accelerated as the 90s went on. Obviously, the internet came about as a thing. But then when I moved in-house originally from law firm to Apple, I realized just how many people have to work to get a product out the door, right? Not just the legal people, but the people in product and operations and marketing and so on and so forth. And they all need to be able to collaborate. They all need to be able to communicate. They all need to be able to synchronize their negotiation strategy. And there were tools and people who were doing that, sort of managing the business and whatever. And in legal, we had nothing, right? Again, we were not far from the typing pool, right? But you could see that there was a need, right? I think that I won't say that I was the first or even come close to identifying that need, because it was others, but you could feel the gap, right? And there was so much need to get on the phone and just have conversations with people all the time and just try to communicate about what was going on, that the sharing of information, the coordination of information and strategy was just like a huge part of the lawyering process, which nobody teaches you in law school, right? It's all about like Hadley versus Baxendale,
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. Did you pick up on any of that in your law firm days? I mean, I was a paralegal before I went to law school. I practiced in big law and medium law
Mm.
before I made the switch over to the business side of the law, almost holistically 14 years ago. And it wasn't anywhere near on my radar in my law firm days. But was that something that you were already kind of picking up
It
on as
it
you're working
it
with your clients?
I was so my brother and I in our early days before we went to college had a software business where we were making what were called electronic bulletin board systems, right?
Okay.
Those were dial-up systems. People would dial into your computer and they'd leave
Wow.
messages for each other, do whatever. And we were creating some of the stuff that did that. And so I had a taste of what it was like to collaborate and use electronics for that, but I had not, just to be perfectly clear, connected the two in any way beyond like, oh, this is interesting, and someday you may be able to do this at scale. But I hadn't connected that as a legal concept. What I did see, and which plays nicely into some of the discussion we're going to have, though, is the paralegals knew everything. Like the
Yes.
lawyers knew the law, but the paralegals knew how to get stuff done. They knew how the systems worked. They knew how to like find things out. They knew how to put together the PowerPoints and presentations for the clients. Like they didn't get a lot of the credit, but they made the place work. And
Yeah.
I think in some ways, legal ops is sort of the successor to some of that generation and that role.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. You see so many different disciplines and backgrounds that
Mm.
go into legal operations. At my team at Facebook, I don't think I had a single person who had a similar background on my team in legal ops. Somebody had come from IP operations, somebody had come from finance. I had a terrific direct report who came from the nonprofit world, slightly in an operational role. So all these multidisciplinary entry points that come into legal operations, which I think just speaks to the diversity of thought that's required in order to succeed in that function, and to make it successful. But then you make the transition from the law firm life into your first in-house role. And are you basically hit over the head with how multidisciplinary you have to be at that point?
Yes. I mean, I had spent my years at the law firm. First of all, I was making a transition, so I'd spent my years at the law firm doing litigation. When I came in house at Apple, it was all transactional. So I that was actually pretty helpful in a way because while I was learning how to write deals and so on and so forth and learning Apple's business processes, being a litigator teaches you pretty quickly what matters when disputes come up, which is a lot of the reason people write deals. It's not the only reason, but
Yeah,
it's an important
it's a
consideration.
great way to learn, though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a great way to learn. So, but I was immediately hit over the head by like, wow, you better talk with operations, you better check with engineering, and what's the product roll up, and these schedules that would get put together that were like these Gantt charts from hell that with everything was connecting, and realizing like nobody, it's not your deadline, it's the company's deadline.
yeah,
Like you miss that, and then all these like you can see everything trails off into disaster, right? Like it's all written that way,
yep,
and that was immediately apparent and but also exciting. Like you feel like, oh wow, I have a stake in this, I'm building something, I'm helping to make products people use, I have a role, people are relying on me, people are depending upon me. I can see that connection much more granularly than I could when I was working at a law firm,
yeah.
for sure.
I'm guessing it's still a little too early for
Mm,
legal operations to be a coalesced function or a standalone function or anything like that.
right.
When did that first get on your radar? Like, what was it? What was it like when the world decided that this was a function and it was going to be a thing?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I would say probably the early 2000s, somewhere around there, I had a meeting with Connie Brenton, who's very well
Yep,
known in these
absolutely.
circles, and she kind of reached out to me because I was doing a bunch of different things at Yahoo, and we didn't yet have a legal ops function, but we were a good sized company, and we were known for being pretty entrepreneurial and open to new ideas. And she reached out and said, "Hey, you want to have breakfast?" So we got together and she was like, I think there's going to be this thing. Right. And it's going to be it was like that scene. There's a scene in, I think it's the Charles Lindbergh, where Jimmy Stewart comes out and he's like, well, someday there'll be airplanes and they'll carry people over the ocean and they'll do whatever, right? Like, and they had that scene to demonstrate not only like the history of what happens afterwards, but also to show this is a very smart character. Except
Yeah,
this was happening in real life, so I'm standing there with like the real life version, Gandalf of legal ops, and she's sort of laying it out for me, and it's like one of those things where like now you say legal ops and people go, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Right? Like, of course, it's obvious. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't you run the function in this way? Why wouldn't you be thoughtful? Why wouldn't you have processes and systems and think about things systematically and work out your strategy? But at the time, like nobody was thinking this way. And she's like, well, we've been doing this at NetApp and some other companies are starting it. And would you like to get, once started at Yahoo and get involved in some of these meetings? And I was like, huh, yeah, I think I would. So, went off and chatted with our then GC, and we were just dipping our toes, like looking around. And our big problem at the time, which seems very mundane now, was legal billing. Like everything was on one, piece of paper that would get passed around the
Yep.
department and it would never get paid, right? It
Yeah.
would get
Yeah.
lost. Someone would go on vacation. It would be, wait, has anyone seen the bill? Right. It'd be gone. It was a terrible way to conduct business and made it really very hard for us to plan. And so that was where we started. But it all started from that, just sitting down with her and having someone just sort of say like, well, have we ever thought about doing this differently?
Yeah.
And immediately realizing, oh, maybe there is an opportunity. And that led to, hiring our first person to do legal ops at Yahoo, Jeff Frankie, and then starting to participate in a group of initially about 6, 7 companies, and then it became like 12, and then it grew, that were just almost like, it was almost like I guess those salons in Paris must have been, back in the day where like, I have brought my beautiful painting, right? Like everyone would come, I call it impressionist, right? And like, but we were all coming together and everybody's like, well, what are you doing? Like, what's
Yeah.
working for you? Or how did you get approval for that? Or where'd you get the budget for that?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like this anti-competitive action where people were sharing trade secrets or anything like that. It was literally like, how do we do this better? And just sort of marveling that there was somebody else out there who was facing those same challenges and trying to do it. So
Yeah.
that I think is when things really started to take off, at least for Yahoo. And for me, was what just that realization, oh, there's an entire community of people, right, who think this is an interesting thing, who can come together and we can share ideas. So we're not just, single voices yelling in the hurricane. We're a chorus yelling in the hurricane, if you
Yeah.
will, because it was
Slightly
still
louder.
tough.
Slightly
Yeah,
louder. But yeah.
yeah.
Well, you talked about one of the first things after your conversation with Connie was going to your GC to have a conversation about, hey, should we do this? And here's why I would advocate for it.
Mhm.
Was that a tough conversation to have at all?
No, and I give Mike full credit for that because Yahoo was always a pretty entrepreneurial place,
Yep.
and Mike was always the type of GC who was like, okay, you got an idea. If it's a good idea, go do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you any money for it. I'm not going to give you any resources for it, but you go, buddy. And if you can come
Yeah.
back with something that makes sense,
Yeah.
let's talk about it, right? And then
Well,
eventually, of course, there would be those things, but like
sure.
he was always willing to let us run with an idea if he thought there was some merit to it, and he could immediately see that things like e-billing and things like
Yeah.
that really
Yeah.
were obviously
I was gonna
opportunities
say
for us.
you could show some savings on that pretty quickly by adding
Right,
some process
right,
to it and be like, "Hey, I've created on my own
right,
budget. Now can we do a couple other things?"
right.
Well, there are plenty of legal ops professionals out there who still have difficult conversations like that with the GCs or CLOs that they might report to. Do you have any advice for them on how they should tackle those conversations?
Well, it depends with everybody. Everybody's different, but I think start with the need, like not just the opportunity of what other people are doing, but like, hey, here we are. We have this challenge. In our case, it was e-billing, but it might be getting contracts done or coordinating the workflows or whatever it is. Um, Start with that and relate it to the company strategy and what the department's trying to do. Like, you want to lower costs and be more efficient. Here's this way we can do this, right? Here's this process. In fact, we don't even have to start from scratch. I happen to know some people over at Blunk, did this, and
Yeah.
I'd be happy to talk to them, come back with a proposal. You don't have to agree today, but is it okay if I explore that and come back to you with it?
Yeah.
And start a conversation, because I think where things fall down a lot of times with any proposal is not just legal ops, is like people come in with an idea and they're like, I'm going to sell the idea. Right. And I was like, no, don't sell the idea. You don't know yet if it's a good idea. You think it's a good idea. Ask, hey, do you think this would be a good idea? What would make it a great idea? What would you need to see to feel comfortable proceeding forward? Like, have I captured the things that are on your mind and of most concern right now? Is there anything right now that would make you say like, let's do this not now, but later? right? Like just have that conversation and ask more questions than you start pitching, make them a part of the process. And then you're not selling, you're bringing them along, right?
Yeah,
You're right. They're already with you.
absolutely right. Um, you talked a little bit earlier about kind of being a fresh lawyer, going to law school. We talked a little bit about how it was such a transition
Mm,
to go from the law firm life to the in-house world and learning all of these different things. So if you were to go back and take a look at law school and advocate for this,
mm.
what would you do differently in law school? Like, how should it be taught differently, if at all, in your mind?
Well, I think one of the challenges we have with law schools, it's only 3 years, right? So they try to get everything in there, and it's like it's a little bit of this, and it's a pastiche, and you go off to the law firm and or whatever, and you're sort of trained in everything. But I think the cycles are getting faster, so there's actually less training going on at the companies than people think or imagine in law school that it might be. So I think one thing is having more tracks, and there's this increasingly happening for people to learn about the technical disciplines and things that they're going to experience out in the working world. Like a couple of years ago, there were very few privacy programs, for example, at major law schools. That's starting to
Yep.
change, right? Few security programs, right? Fewer AI programs.
Yeah.
All of this is it's helping people to get familiar with the technology and the types of issues that they can raise so that they can think intelligently. And then on the legal ops side of the fence, bringing it back to the audience, right? Like the role of lawyers is changing. Like it is not just to dispense legal advice. Legal advice is the tool by which you advance a business interest. It happens to be your tool and yours particular skill set, but marketing is also trying to advance a business interest. They used to have a different tool. So you have to start with the legal advice is my reason to be at the table. But once I'm at the table, the question is, what value am I driving? And am I
Yeah.
thinking systematically about the challenges of the business and how I can improve it? And AI is going to accelerate the getting the information and the knowledge. There's plenty of hallucination, but we'll get past that or get
Yeah.
enough past it that people are comfortable with what the decisions are, um, but where the output is. But it is if you imagine a world in which the first draft of things or the first output from putting a contract in is going to be the AI takes a pass at it and flags some stuff for you, you're not just managing a tool, you're managing an architecture. You're managing an ecosystem. What do I need to tell the tool to make sure that it will do things correctly, right? How can I even, how can I ensure that it's incorporating all the interests? What background information do I have to give it? What documents do I have to feed it? And so on and so forth. People right now are at this nascent stage where people are like, I use Gemini to do X, Y, Z. Well, yeah, in the next stage, though, people are going to be building gems and agentic AI to go out and do functions and simplify things in the department. So what I wish that law schools were doing a little bit more of is think systemically about the law as part of an ecosystem of legal interests, yes, but also business interests, societal interests, social interests, and think about how you frame and structure legal conversations in a way that is architectural that will then translate over to some of the work that people are doing in legal ops, which will be about like how do you design systems and processes for legal teams and so on and so forth. By and large, I might say lawyers are generally not the leaders, like starting with that stuff. It
Yeah.
often is somebody, as you were saying, who comes from a different background. And I
Yep.
think that's fine. It can be complementary, but I think lawyers, the where lawyering is going to be managing all of these disparate pieces and inputs and sort of helping to mastermind and coordinate the output. Like that feels like where the profession is heading.
Yeah. I think you said a couple things that I want to double click on.
Mm,
One, um, 3 years is too long for law, or not long enough, maybe for law school.
mhm,
And I wonder if you have any thoughts around the level of apprenticeship or the lack thereof that's required by the programming.
mm,
You look at almost any other profession in the doctorate world or in the post grad world, doctors, even CPAs, there's a level of apprenticeship that's required in order to earn your license. We don't really have that. Like, do you
yeah,
think that changes the game for lawyers when they come out? If we require that for a year or a year and a half, of course that requires you to maybe
yeah.
condense down the classes even more so. But what are your thoughts on that?
I it I haven't thought a lot about it, so let me just say that up front.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of lawyers are getting that anyway because they're sort of picking a firm and they're picking a part of a firm and they're being trained and brought up to speed on clients and client issues. What they're missing is a bit more of that systemic thinking. Like, because even in a firm, it's like you're in the IP group and you're thinking about A, B, C issues, and that's your apprenticeship. I think it
Yeah.
would be great if there was a program, and it doesn't have to be like a law school, like law school. It could be like directors college or the equivalent, right? Or you can go on a regular basis to like enhance yourself, learn more about these types of issues. I'm not talking about like just general MCLE. I'm talking about like a much more structured, coordinated program, kind of like what Berkeley's trying to do right now with AI,
Yeah.
right? Where you can really steep yourself in a problem and get to learn it and get better at it.
Yeah.
That's what's missing. It's the now some people can do that. They can just sort of take I had this issue here and this issue here and this here and put it all together for themselves. But most people need a little bit more structure or could benefit from that. So
Yeah,
that's what's missing.
I'm very much a hands-on learner.
Yeah.
I can learn enough from a book and words on a page
Hmm.
and a YouTube how-to video, sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I think until I get in there and I start manipulating things and I really start feeling what it's like to put in a prompt or check an output or recalibrate a prompt based on an output that I've received from AI, until I actually get in and do those things, all of this will be very conceptual in my mind. And
Hmm.
concepts are not typically very helpful for a practical exercise like the practice of law. So that's why I'm a huge proponent of doing hands-on work as early as you possibly can. Um, you said one other thing, which kind of gets us into the next topic. I think is a really nice segue. You talked about email early on, as you know, email, and I am old enough to remember when email was not a thing, and I'm old enough to remember how email broke onto the scene. I was in college. I started using email. I'm pretty sure my freshman year to communicate with my TAs and professors, and then a little bit more across campuses. I went to Cal. I had some friends at Stanford. Lord knows why, but we would communicate over email, and that felt like a really cool thing because we didn't have cell phones, we weren't texting each other, so the only way we really could communicate with each other was either written medium like a letter, which we weren't really doing, or the phone. So email was very revolutionary from that perspective. And when it came out for lawyers, Richard Susskind had this very famous line, and everybody laughed at him for it. And he said, you know, one day and within 5 years, this will replace how lawyers communicate with their clients. And everyone said, no way. Who are you kidding? Well, lo and behold, we couldn't think of practicing law, really doing much else these days without email.
Hmm.
And so that brings me to this tie in. I love this analogy. Do you think of AI in a similar fashion, or do you think that it is poignantly different and we should think about it differently?
Well, I think it's going to be it is already just as revolutionary as email and transformative. There's literally and nobody who doesn't have a strategy or isn't thinking about it. And I think 92% of legal departments have deployed some sort of AI technology.
Yeah.
I think what's different about email is like one person communicating with one person, sharing their ideas or their thoughts. And it's like this one-to-one sort of narrow channel. AI, like you can create AI tools that somebody else can interact with, right? And so you're almost becoming a programmer or world builder to start with, right? You can use it, of course, the same way where it's one to one and you're interacting with it. But where I think the opportunity is, and what makes it so exciting, is you can also create a gem or an agent, let's say, and have other people use it. Like I built one just to test it, right? Like I haven't deployed it yet, but I at Collective Health, where I was like, one of the challenges we have, like any company, is we have a lot of things that come into procurement, and a lot of them need to be looked at, and somebody needs to look at it. And often the default place is, guess what? The legal department. The legal department, of course, has 10 million other things to do, right? Because one of the sad things about email, if we can just say it, and communication is it's made it really possible for there to be 100,000 different inputs into the legal team. Right now, you get it from tickets and Slack and messages and email and meetings and in-person conversations. Like everybody's inputting it. Um, but I lost my train of thought. Where was it going?
You were talking about the connection between email and AI and how
Oh yeah,
AI
yeah,
is
yeah. So
significantly
so
different from
yeah, thank you. So I created a tool that would, instead of saying to people, here are the rules for when you should talk to legal, run through this checklist. Here's our policy and practices, which frankly, no one ever follows.
Yeah.
And right, they come to legal anyway.
Yeah.
I created a tool that you could drop a contract on and answer some questions, and it would say, you need to go to legal for A, B, and C, or you're good to go, right? And it would, in the background, it's running a threshold like dollars, issues, right? Types of stuff, looking at, does it have approval? Is there budget approval? And so on and so forth. And there are plenty of reasons and things that have to be worked out before you would deploy something like that to make sure, that somebody actually followed what it said and you're
Yep.
sufficiently confident and there's no privilege issues. But my goodness, like there you're changing it. You're actually using a tool that people would like to use because it's more interactive and they get, answers faster, that saves the legal team potentially time and worry and aggravation, but gets a good result. Like that's exactly the kind of leverage that legal ops exists for, right?
Yeah.
It's driving not just cost savings, but value and efficiency,
Yeah.
right? And so like I look at AI and I'm like, wow, what a great opportunity. And at the same time, like there'll be plenty of dead ends and things people do that they're like, well, that
Sure.
didn't work, right? But
Yeah.
that's what I think is exciting about it.
I love that example for several reasons. And let's talk about a few of them one at a time. Number one, and I actually think you said this in the documentary, and I was really glad. Hopefully, it wasn't prompted, but I'm sure it wasn't. I really hope it wasn't. People and process before technology.
Yes.
Right. And you already had that in this example. You knew from a department perspective which of these contracts needed to get escalated. You had an existing process in place, which is that you have playbooks, you have documentation. Presumably, it was rolled out with respect to training. If somebody new joins on the procurement team, like hopefully they get this document and say, hey, before you send something to legal, just take a look at this to make sure that you do need to send it to legal.
Right.
But the reality of so many legal ops initiatives, and this is such a legal ops dilemma, is that you still really only get to meet humans where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how clean you think your process is, and no matter how well you think you have attached the right people to those processes, sometimes it takes the magic bullet of a special kind of technology. I'm sure you had some technology already attached to this process, whether it was email or some other kind of thing. But along comes this new kind of technology. And to me, this is the next level of unlocking legal operations. Leveraging this kind of technology to take away the chore that really prevented the process from working in the first place, which is that no one looked at the document in every single instance. And now all they got to do is drop this thing in and answer a question. It makes the determination for you.
It makes
and
the
I
determination.
think to me that really encapsulates how powerfully those three pieces fit together.
Yeah, well, it's also what I find exciting about it is exactly that. It's not just using it to make yourself more efficient in any given task, because we've all been through the ringer on that in legal. Can you people do more with less? Can we make you more efficient? Like we must be at this point the most efficient function. We should like ascend to the heavens at this point because we know everything. But it's making other people more efficient and effective while reducing your own workload. Like that to me is the key, right? Like, wow, if this could save me time and save the business time and result in, as you said, a better outcome, why wouldn't we do it? But it starts, as you said, start with the people, understand and the process of and then move to the technology, because you don't want to automate a bad process. First of all, that's stupid. And you also, and having a technological solution doesn't mean people are just going to rush out to adopt it, even if it's cool. Like you may think it's cool, but like, sounds like I have to change my practices and learn how to use your database, Akshay. Not interested in doing that. I'm going to keep doing everything the same way I was, because that's the way I learned it in law school in 1940 or whenever. Right. And so, people tend to be very consistent, which is why a large part and an understated part of the ops function is asking questions, getting buy-in and interest, validating assumptions, and then bringing people to it so that they feel like it's their solution, their answer. They can see the value in it rather than somebody coming to the door and doing the equivalent of what happens on LinkedIn. Hey, I'd like to be your friend. Oh, okay. Hey, I've got a product I'd like to sell you. Right? Like that's right. That is too often the impact. The other thing it does, frankly, in having those types of conversations, I think, is it takes you out of being an IT manager, which is a lot of what can that can happen to legal ops. People think of it as, oh, you manage the legal
Sure.
tools, and it makes
Yep.
you more a problem solver, a strategist, a partner in having some of those difficult decisions and discussions, and that's where the value lies, like long term.
Yeah, I think the architecture of that enablement, I think, is probably what interested me the most in
Mm,
going into operations. And I think as I talk to more junior folks who are going into that profession, I can see the ones that are really interested in heading in that direction,
mhm.
and others who are more interested in going strictly into the technology side and
Yep.
being super technical and connecting systems and so forth. Well, it kind of brings us very nicely into the AI discussion a little bit more. So I'll ask a super broad question: how do you see AI changing the profession at all? And let's start with lawyers first, and then we'll talk about legal ops second. Because in my view, I think there are two very important distinctions to draw there between the two. But in your perspective, like, how do you see AI really changing the profession?
Wow, that's a big question. Let's break it down into pieces. So, one thing that has traditionally been a hallmark of the legal profession is the lawyers have known more law than the clients, right? We have been like the spice traders in Dune. You must
Yep.
come to us and we will get you
Yep.
where you need to go.
Great
And
reference.
more people are going to be querying AI first, right?
Yeah.
Or it'll be built into the tools they're using, like Word or Excel or Google Sheets or whatever it is that they're using. And so it'll be a natural part of the workflow to get some of that input. Should they be putting privileged things into? No, right? We can all agree on that. But let us also agree that it's going to happen, just like people are putting
Sure.
things in medical histories and whatnot into
Yeah.
ChatGPT. So people will come hopefully with a better perspective on some of the things that they need to do and some ideas, and you will have to respond to those ideas, and it hopefully can make it less, oh great, you read a book last night and now I have to deal with this, and more of a dialogue, right? Which can really be valuable because then you're having a conversation and it's not like I will now bless you with my knowledge. It's more, let's talk about how we can achieve a goal together, right? And that
Yeah.
that can hopefully make the profession both more collaborative and more rewarding, right? The second thing is it will introduce a whole bunch of issues that didn't exist before.
Yep.
Like the people who record everything everywhere they go. Like we're doing this now for however long we're going to do it, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. But like there are people who are wearing medallions and everywhere they go, they're recording everything. And they don't think anything about the fact that they just took Aunt Sophie to the hospital and stood next to someone who was telling them about his medical problems and whatnot. But the lawyers, right? The lawyers are like, you did what? And you recorded, like, oh my God. So that's going to be like a whole set of issues for us to parse through as a society.
Yeah.
It's going to change the profession, I think, in terms of maybe the training, but certainly the hiring initially. Like I think what you will see initially is people say, "Oh, we have these tools. They allow us to leverage and do things that maybe some of the less experienced people couldn't do
Yep.
previously." And either one of two things will happen: they will hire more or less experienced people to do more sophisticated stuff. I don't think that's going to happen. Or they may move more toward the middle and the top and say, I'll hire senior people, but I'll expect them to do twice the work and they won't have any
Yeah.
junior people to help them.
Yeah.
This will then create a gap because, as we were talking about, like you learned, right? You were saying, I love learning.
Absolutely.
I'm a hands on person. I learn from doing things. There will be a gap there, right? Because
Yeah.
the next generation won't have that apprenticeship experience. So, how will we fill in that gap will be a real
Yeah.
question for the profession.
Yeah.
But bringing it to legal ops, because I know that's where we are, right?
Yep. Yep.
I think legal ops will be a critical function in helping to shape, like, how do legal teams communicate, decide, inform, strategize? Like, what are the tools we're going to build, and how are we going to deploy them to really enable the next group of professionals to do more effectively, um, in a way that doesn't frankly kill them, because all those inputs coming in, right, are not going to go away. It's not going to be like when you can do the contracts faster, people are going to go, great, now you can leave at 5.
Yeah. No.
That's not
More
going to happen. They'll
contracts.
just do
More
more
contracts.
contracts, right? Or they'll
Yep.
throw something else in. So it'll help us to scale, but the legal ops people will be a big part of thinking about, like, how do we do that? How do we strategize? Are there ways we could, for example, um, use these tools to do legal work or legal review that actually empowers the business in ways that hasn't been done before, like running the HR questions, standard interview questions through AI to see if they are friendly to people who might have learning disabilities or be on the spectrum, right? Like that's an easy thing that AI should be able to do. You assign it a role, it can churn that out. That work might not have gotten done before, but how empowering and helpful to the organization to have a tool that can do that. And legal ops has the opportunity to build it, right?
Yeah.
Or helping to look at the workflow and decide what's most important and what's critical and what's coming in, and give the GC or senior leaders a dashboard to understand and make connections they might not be able to make today, right?
Yeah.
That'll be a big part of it, I think.
And we're starting to see, I think, the makings of this now. And I've been reading, I don't know how applicable this is. It kind of goes on both sides. I've been reading
Hmm.
a little bit about the economic theory of Javon's paradox, which is that, when a new technology comes in to replace certain tasks or people or roles, it ends up proliferating them more than it actually starts suppressing them or eliminating them. Again, there are two schools of thought. It doesn't apply in the context of AI, or it does still, and so that's what we'll see. You're certainly starting to see some of the data come out saying that it is creating new jobs. In our profession, what do you see for law grads as they come out of law school in the next, 2 or 3 years? Are we looking at completely different titles and types of roles? Do you see anything differently with your crystal ball?
Well, for the profession, it's already becoming important that you have people who can do data analytics and really look thoughtfully at like spend and time and prioritization and communication and all of that. And that absolutely is going to be a big part of legal ops. For the people who are in law school who want to be lawyers, I think what's going to be interesting is there will be more information at your fingertips, more insights. And the question is just going to be, how can you use them? Like when I was a lawyer, everybody always wanted to know, how did Judge so-and-so rule? Have they ever looked at a case like this before? And blah, 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 blah,
Yes,
blah. Like, and so they would deploy some schmuck, usually me, to go off to the law library and, read everything the judge so-and-so had decided on. Like now a tool should be able to pull that up for you in a second,
absolutely.
right? And
Absolutely.
it should be able to look at your brief and say, like, I've tried to write this brief for Judge so and so based on his rulings or her rulings. Can you look at it and see if it's consistent with the type of logic that might appeal? What
Yeah.
questions might he or she have? Like, that's such an empowering thing to be able to have in your toolkit. So that I think will be an amazing part for the. On the other hand, I think the problem of technology just leads to more input will absolutely be there. There'll be more lawsuits filed by people using ChatGPT because it'll be easier,
Sure.
right? So,
Sure. Yeah.
there'll be benefits and burdens, right? But on
Yeah.
balance, I think for the people who are in law school, the opportunity is still there to do the lawyering, but it won't be just pouring through the cases and writing the briefs or writing the drafts. It'll be thinking strategically about the business interests and the legal interests, being able to have a better source of input and comparison and contrast, and have someone more or less you can, in theory, bounce ideas off of, right? A tool that can help you shape your ideas should lead to better output and better briefs and better decision making. The risk, of course, is people get overwhelmed with all of it, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of how I think about this, and whether this resonates with you.
Mm.
Over the generations, I just see this with my own kids. The baseline with which they start their thinking is significantly higher than what I started with at their age. And that's, to me, is a function of the foundational information that they were fed at a very, very early age. And I wonder if that is a leg up for law students who start coming out and going into law school in a couple of years, where the foundational elements of what they learn and what they come out with allows them to punch, for lack of a better term, at a slightly higher weight class than they would have 10 years ago,
Mhm.
which then allows them to get into some of the strategic conversations and thought processes that you just mentioned. My only concern there is goes back to one of the earlier questions I asked, which is, does that mean that law school has to be taught a little differently? The
Mhm.
one thing that you said, which I think really kind of solidifies a yes for me on that question, is everything that you talked about in terms of collecting that information, whether it's judge decisions, or how certain districts lean a certain way, or contracts that are negotiated in a certain fashion. That's all data. It's
Hmm.
all data. That data is out there. It's just a matter of how do you collect it, how do you harness it, how do you analyze it, and then how do you turn it into something actionable. We don't
Hmm.
do any of those kinds of things in law school. We don't learn how to do any
Right.
of those kinds of. So if law school can somehow package that up into one skill set that I would love for law students to have coming out, it would be that. Thoughts on that from you?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I think that's right. I mean, first of all, I think that the technology is only like it's funny because like people after the wheel was invented had a different view and a different empowerment from people who lived
Yes,
before the wheel, right? And that is
absolutely.
true of many types of technology. It provides you with leverage and an opportunity to use it for something. So I think the tools that are available to now from when you and I were in law school or around that age are so much more advanced and empower you to do so much more quickly and more easily, then yes, there's absolutely a lever up. The the interesting counter to that has been like there's some data I've seen that like attention spans are getting smaller because
They are.
people are used to bite-sized information from social media and so on
Absolutely.
their tools.
Yeah.
And a lot of the type of work that we're contemplating in law is attention based. You have to spend the time. You got to
Deep
roll up
thinking.
your sleeves. Like, yes, AI can give you a summary of what it thinks the issues are or whatever. But at some point, you've got to read the opinion and you've got to really wrestle with it. And if you don't, you end up, in law.com with an article about you and some judge doing a sanction, right? So with great power comes great responsibility, as gentle
Yes.
Uncle Ben said. I do think it's exciting that the technology has been in the process of and is now finally really reaching the law, right?
Yeah.
Because like even 10 years ago, if you were to say, let's talk about you know, uh uh legal software, people would go, "You mean like Word?" Right? Like, and now, right, how many companies are there that are
Yeah,
really, focused on that? So I think the tools are
absolutely.
getting better. I think it would be helpful for law schools to steep people in some of that technology, help them understand the implications of it, give them some practical applications of it, maybe put it to use, in things like the legal aid clinics and other things. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be, and let people use it and understand it and get comfortable with what the possibilities of it are, right?
Yeah.
That would be really exciting, I think.
Awesome. All right, let's talk a little bit about the surprise coming up at clock for a few
Mm,
minutes, and then we'll wrap up. Um, the idea for this documentary came from Susan Packle. She grabbed me in 2023 at a conference and said, "I have this crazy idea. I need you to tell me it's dumb or we should do it." I said, "Okay." And within about 3 seconds of her starting, I was like, we're going to do this. Like, we got to figure out a way to do this. So for me, there's a really kind of personal story about why I wanted the story of legal operations to be told, because it spawned an entire second phase of my career that has given me a significant level of joy. But what was it about for you to be a part of this and to tell this story about the legal profession?
I think there were a couple of things that really appealed to me, and one was just that it's a story that deserves to be told, right? Not just for historical reasons, but for present contemporaneous reasons, right? It's a story about in a profession where not much changes very quickly, right? And there is by rights and by design a fealty to precedent and continuity and thoroughness to a time when people realized there was an opportunity to do more and to accelerate the function of the legal departments and the teams and the business in a way that hadn't been done before. And you look at what we're going through right now. We were just talking about AI and what is all the impact it's going to have. Like nobody really knows. Like you can ask me, which is very flattering. Like you can
Yep.
get anybody on this podcast. Everyone will give you a different opinion about where it's going
That's
and what
great,
and
great
what
perspectives, though.
yeah, and what is happening. But it's a time of change and times of change. Some people find that very very scary.
Yeah.
Um, Other people see, and this I find myself more in this camp. Other people look at it and they say like, "This is opportunity." Like suddenly the old rules don't apply. Like I can figure out like all this stuff, and I've got all these tools I didn't have before. Yes, I've got to figure out these issues, privacy and security and all that. But like, what would that mean if I could figure that out? How could I use these to make my life easier, to make the business more effective and more efficient? And so I feel like this is the moment where that opportunity really exists for legal ops professionals and for departments. And so to go back and say, well, actually, this isn't the first time there's been a revolution,
Yes.
you know. And
Yeah.
there these early days where people were kind of just figuring it out off their desks, part-time, if we're honest, like most of the time.
Yeah.
And to go back and look at that, and not as a, oh, let's, reverentially look at that time and those people and all of that and celebrate, the founding fathers kind of idea, but more, oh, like, what's different about them? Like, why can't I be that person? Why can't I think about what the next generation would be? And now that I have these tools available to me that they didn't even have,
Yeah.
and organizations that have whole benchmarks and standards and groups that I can go to, like, how much can I achieve? How much can I do? And like, that to me is super exciting, right? That's
Yeah.
that's the story I hope people take from it, right? Like, not
Yeah.
the story of what happened, but the story of what happens next.
Yeah. Do you think there's a different takeaway for lawyers or legal ops professionals depending on who sees the film?
Mm. Well, I haven't seen the whole thing
Yeah.
yet, so with that caveat, but
Yeah.
just from my segment, I think for legal ops professionals, it's you're not alone, and there's a lot that can be done even in small ways over time. But now is your moment and your chance to make a big difference. For lawyers, I hope it is, stop thinking about legal ops as just the IT department,
Yeah.
right? Like, start thinking about them as your strategic partners who can really make an impact on how you show up, how you tell the story of your department, how you show the value to the business, how you generate results. Um, you know, think of them as your secret weapon, right? Like, that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody thinks about it that way, and that's probably always going to be true. Not everybody is the same way, but like, I hope more and more people will begin to think about it that way.
Yeah, I do think you're starting to see that trend. If the number of legal ops roles that are open right now is any indication of that,
Right.
there's certainly a wave towards feeling like this role has really arrived on the main stage, and the early adopters have transitioned and given way to kind of the mainstream. So I think we're all kind of hoping to see more and more of that as we proceed.
Yep.
All right. Ron, thanks so much for joining me today. That was a fantastic conversation. I really honestly could have gone for another hour on this. You have such a font of information and history and background on these issues. It was really a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right.